You are listening to Wicked Psychotherapists, a podcast where two psychotherapists show you that taking care of and learning about mental health doesn't have to be wicked hard.
This is Tanya.
This is Erin, and welcome to Wicked Psychotherapists.
Yes, welcome. So we are going to be discussing something very apropos, very appropriate for today, mental health awareness, because mental health awareness is in the month of May officially, and that's when this episode will be out. So we thought that we would focus on some trends, some topics, some stigmas, and just some things that we're seeing, different takes on it for 2024 and maybe, 2023 kind of thing. But this is definitely an important conversation, not only because of the stigma of mental health, but also because of information being appropriate and maybe not so appropriate, right? And understanding kind of the difference between the two. So the first thing I thought we would just kind of dive into it would be the different trends that we might be seeing in mental health, or things that you might be seeing patterns of, things that you're hearing a lot just in your practice, or maybe just in the news out in the ether, like ether,
I don't know.
Ether, out in the ether.
Okay.
I said ethersphere. Just made up a word there, out in the ether, that, just as a practitioner and as a person who has this awareness as an expert in mental health, what are you seeing? Anything that you find interesting, things that, are just appearing everywhere?
In the ethosphere?
I was just taking a drink. So yeah.
I guess I've been noticing that there's a lot of, more uptick. I'm still seeing a lot of the people coming in wondering if they have ADHD or not. And it seems like an increase of anxiety. I haven't really noticed a lot of different trends with people watching things lately, but just mostly wondering about ADHD still. And that seems to come up a lot.
Are you finding that they're looking for like the diagnosis of it, or just like
diagnosis, or they're thinking they have it, or they've heard somebody talking about it, so it sounds like them. It's, which is a little, can be a little stressful or annoying. I don't want to say annoying, but if somebody doesn't really have something and then they're really sure that this is what they have, but it could be something else, because a lot of the symptoms of ADHD, it could be post-trauma, it could be, anxiety, it could be shown, you could be tired, it could, there's a lot of things that can make you be distracted or.
Yeah. So when you are discussing that, there's a feeling of, no, this is me. I'm pretty sure this is, what my diagnosis is. It's kind of like having to broaden the conversation for you on your part.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I have been seeing not too much of that, but I've been personally seeing a lot of people who believe will mention borderline personality disorder, which, as we know, is something that is, I feel, complicated to diagnose. And depending on how long you have known this person, how much of an accurate or inaccurate historian the person is, when you kind of take the history and, the biopsychosocial, it can be really tough to determine. But I do feel, and I'm going to age myself or just, be able to you're going to see how technologically disinclined I am. I don't go on the TikTok. Okay. But I have heard mention of, well, I saw this TikTok video. I saw this and I feel like I have this. And I really want to stress that's okay to bring to your therapist. It's not so, to open up if you kind of are having this concern. But if before you didn't really have any concerns about yourself, you weren't really, worried about things, and then you saw this TikTok video and you think you have this huge thing that people say, oh, might be why you don't fit in anywhere. There's a lot to that. There's a lot of conversation to that, to be able to establish that. And a personality disorder is a lifelong thing that you need to be working on intensely. It is not a small diagnosis. Not like there's any small diagnosis, but it's not something that it infused all throughout your personality. So it's, it's very tough to determine that. You want to be very careful with that. And I personally see some clients in an EAP, which is short term, right? And then for me, it is. And then I also have a private practice. So when I'm seeing it in the private practice, that is something we can look towards, we can discuss. In the EAP program, that's something I may discuss and say, you might want to have a more like a longer term therapist for that, because EAP is typically geared towards kind of short term goal oriented issues. That's not always the referral that we get, but that is something that kind of has to be worked through. So I do just kind of want to make that clear, because that can be confusing, I think, to people, that if you're in an EAP program, some of those things that the therapist it's not like traditional therapy where you kind of can go on and on. You only have a set amount of sessions and you're typically working towards more of a goal. I don't know if that's your experience with EAP. Yeah. And that's so that can be difficult to establish a personality disorder because you need a lot of time to diagnose that. So I'm finding that somewhat problematic, because I think just the understanding of that for people, because of what, maybe through TikTok or just kind of what they've heard about therapy, quote unquote therapy, they just kind of assume the whole umbrella is just, you diagnose me, you establish this understanding of who I am, and it kind of just all comes out. There can be different avenues towards that, different referrals, different points. Just a doctor, like, if you go to like a primary care physician, you may get a referral to a gastroenterologist because you're having stomach issues and they can't pinpoint it right there. There's going to be more of a specialist. In EAP programs, if there's kind of something that's really big, a question being asked like that, more than likely that's not going to be the exploration. You're going to be, referred outward. So that can be difficult for me, for my EAP clients. But I am hearing a lot of misinformation about borderline symptoms that, when listed generally, any symptoms you can kind of make apply to you. Again, diagnosis is not the same thing. I'm just trying to say that probably self-diagnosis through TikTok is still a trend, a phenomena that I'm seeing. That was my end all be all. And again, I know we said that promotes conversation, but just to be open to that and understanding that it's not necessarily all accurate when you seek out mental health care.
I mean, like they always say, like, it used to be the don't go on WebMD. Don't look stuff on Google. Now we have to feel like don't trust people that are making TikTok videos that we don't know what their background is. And also, just like anything, if you're looking for any diagnosis, you're going to feel like that's you, unless a specialist is diagnosing you.
Right. And I really, I understand that it is absolutely something to spark a conversation, but to just keep that in mind, that perspective in mind. That's all we're saying. And speaking of that, pivoting into kind of generational, trends or anything like that, are you seeing any kind of differences with like older generations coming to, like, I guess it would be Gen X, baby boomers coming to therapy more, or, more Gen Z / millennials, kind of appearing more? Like, what's your experience with that, appearing to therapy?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I am having a lot of all the generations. I feel kind of sad that Gen X is an older generation. So now I'm feeling like I have.
Millennial is kind of the older one too.
Yeah,
so that makes you feel even worse.
I know. But yeah, I actually have a couple in every generation, like millennial. Because I think I start seeing clients like at age like 23, 24. Those are usually but most of my clients are probably in their 30s or 40s right now.
Okay.
So whatever generation that is, that's millennial.
That's probably, probably like millennial and
Y or whatever they call them. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like now I have more in their like mid 20s, maybe late 20s. So maybe kind of more towards the Gen Z, but I definitely have some millennials, and I am seeing an uptick in kind of the older generations. I'm using air quotes, kind of like the older millennials or the Gen Xers or even some baby boomers I'm seeing. And I feel like that's just been over the past like year, maybe year and a half or so. I've personally just been seeing that. And I am curious, do you find and I don't know if you want to speak to this, or not. I will, but I'll give you the chance first.
Okay.
Do you find the experience different with different generations?
Yeah, I do. Because I guess it also depends on what's bringing them into therapy. If, like let's say they have a diagnosis of something and they used to go to therapy, that might look different than somebody that's brand new to therapy and is just trying to figure out things. But I guess I like having the mix of the different generations because not everybody is coming for a diagnosis or coming because they had one in the past. But it does seem like the older generations, the baby boomers or Gen X might have a different appreciation for therapy because maybe in the past they were forced to go to therapy or therapy looked different in the 80s and 90s than it does now. And even most therapists are a little more open and their training is a little different or laws and ethics are different than it was than when they might have been forced to go to therapy. And, or it just might feel different. And also the people in the younger generations, it's mental health has probably been something that's openly been talked about for most of their life because several decades now, it hasn't had, hopefully hasn't had as the same stigma as, oh, I'm going to go see my shrink. Oh, you're crazy. So it does seem like it's talked about. You see it approached differently in movies and shows and where, in different parts of mainstream where I know I grew up, it was like the mental health was, what about Bob and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Those
Very
were
extreme.
It's like that was my go-to. And then we talked before, then it was like Heathers and Girl Interrupted. So there wasn't really a lot of, and then Fight Club. So it wasn't a lot of really like people who are struggling with mental health stuff. It wasn't really like, oh yeah. And then there's that. Like recently I saw, this is probably a couple years ago, but Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. It is great. If you haven't seen it, it's musical. It's I can't remember the actress's name, but she's really good. And it's really is a really great, almost realistic point of how she discovers that she has borderline personality disorder. And I really love it because she's like making these, looking at it, it's like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with this woman? She's a stalker. She's changing her whole life to find this boyfriend that she used to like. And then she's doing this and that. And she's like arguing with friends, having a lot of really unhealthy things happening until you find out at the end that she has borderline personality disorder. But then they go to therapy and she's getting the right type of treatment. It's really well done. And the actress who wrote it, she actually has mental health issues and she wanted to put it into the forefront in a different way. Yeah, it was really, and that was the first time I've seen like something such as borderline personality disorder in that realm where you're like, oh my gosh, this is so relatable. I could have this.
It's portrayed.
Yeah. It's way different because going back to Girl Interrupted, she had borderline personality disorder. And it's just
she was treated locked up and inpatient. And
and it was like, you're really like, wow, this girl is sick. So like she has to be in a psych ward. But it's really different than the character in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Right. Yeah. You can see the points of origin. You can see the humanity in that. And you can see, okay, this person, maybe genuinely did not recognize these patterns in themselves. And when they did, then they were like, okay, let's go to therapy. Let's take care of this.
Right.
I saw, I think a couple of seasons, and I think there was some time in between another season and I kind of lost it past that, but I would like to
I would definitely say to watch it. Like some of it, you're like, okay, enough of the singing or the sex or whatever is happening. But it's
I remember that.
But it is, I think it's all it's the whole arc. So you could, towards the end when the diagnosis happens. And I was really impressed with the therapy too, because a lot of times when things are portrayed, it's not realistic or they don't have the real treatment things, or they just say therapy or they put you in a mental institution. But this is like, really talking and the difficulty. And so you had
Digging
mentioned
into it.
yeah, like really getting into the meat of it. And you'd mentioned like people are getting their diagnoses on TikTok for this and for other things. And there's a lot more to it than just I'm maybe spending a lot of money, or I'm dating a lot of people, or I like my friend one day, then I don't like my friend, or like there's a lot more to it than just whatever people might be posting in 50 seconds.
Right. There's a lot more context, I think, that needs to be explored from it. And I think that's just, if you are able to get therapy or whatever help, is helpful in that 50 seconds worth of anything saying, is this you? That can apply to a lot of people who feel like they have something, but they don't know how to talk about it, or they want to be identified for these traits that maybe are internal and external, and that it may or may not be even mental health, right? So, just something to keep in mind. But yeah, that's really cool that, found a really great representation of that. And it makes me want to watch that. And for everyone out there, it's a great
It
recommendation.
is. It's really good. I mean, it's funny. It has, like, if you like musicals that make no sense, like it's,
I do.
yeah, it's just, because it doesn't make it, it's like, she just breaks out into song in any time, but like some of them are just really funny and some are just like, what the heck? But again, it's all the whole process.
Yeah. And actually, it's so funny because I do remember watching that, and I myself was kind of wondering about some dynamics in my family, and it was helping me to kind of place it into scenarios and kind of realize, oh, that's why they were doing that, and to understand that.
Yeah.
So I found that pretty helpful as well, even though
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to finishing the season and seeing the therapy part of it. I didn't even actually see that. So
because they even talk about,
that's really great.
They even go into the relationship with her mother and some possible trauma she might have had as a kid. And that's also, like you had mentioned, like the personality disorders, a lot of it is stem from, it's not just, like, well, what may have happened biologically. It's also could be stemmed from some trauma that may have happened too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also do want to, and I know I'm going to sound like a meme here, but I really want to stress with, if, you are exploring and finding that personality disorder is really something that, maybe that you have a diagnosis and it really is affecting multiple facets of your life. Of course, there is an origin point. Of course, there is something that is, not, you didn't ask for this. You weren't, nobody wants a personality disorder. It is a responsibility to be aware and to get help for that, because unfortunately, it does affect a lot of not only, yourself, your own interactions, it affects everything around you. And once you start to get that help, things will start to align and make more sense. So I just really want to put that out there that, it's not that people, when they're talking about borderline people, I'm hoping that people are not saying, that there's a stigma that it's like, oh, that I don't want to work with them, and, this and that people hear. I think the level of difficulty and time invested in treatment is very high. However, I do think it is very worthy and it is very understandable. There are definitely practitioners that are out there that, are able to work with that. You just have to be able to research and find the right ones, which is your responsibility if you want to make things right. Just like if you have a medical condition, if you choose to, if you're aware of it and you choose to ignore it, it's not going to get any better. So that's just my little PSA. I just want to say that it's not necessarily something that is your fault, just like, all the things that we carry, but it is something that we have to manage, right? So, with that, I do think that, with the different generations, I think, I definitely, with the younger generation that I see, they have the instant vocabulary. I mean, they have it down. It is interwoven in their conversation. They don't need me to define anything. Like, they could probably define it better than me because, like you said, they grew up with it. The older generations, I find, are kind of, I'm really impressed with how open they are because, like you said, they may have had a different exposure and understanding of therapy while growing up. And so to be open to it at this point and to understand it at this point kind of takes some courage, to say, okay, I'm going to work on this. And I'm finding very impressive levels of understanding, even in, kind of the quote unquote older generations. Right. it's really, I do think mental health being in the vocabulary has had its benefits for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of, things like telehealth and the way that therapy is delivered, there's text therapy, things like that. We have all different forms to meet all different needs for people. Do you have any thoughts about kind of, if it's here to stay, what your opinion of that is, that you want to share, anything like that?
Well, I'm really glad that there is such a thing as telehealth and online therapy, or, I, for instance, used online medical the other day for myself, which I love it. I love that I could just contact like Teladoc or something like that instead of going somewhere. And I love that I can offer something like that for my clients where they don't have to. What I love, even for the clients who don't work from their own homes, but before it, it's like they have to figure out, okay, I'm going to have an hour appointment. It's, like say it's 20 minutes from my work or 20 minutes from home. Then so 1 hour appointment could be like a 2 hour or 2.5 hour event for the person. So now it can be, well, I'm just going to go drive to a parking lot if somebody's home, or go in my room if I'm at home, or lock myself in my office if I'm at work, and just take that 50 minutes or 60 minutes. And I actually feel like therapy has become deeper and more. I feel like we're able to reach different points in therapy quicker online than in person for the most part. And I don't know if it's because they're comfortable that they're with their cat or their dog, or they're sitting on their couch wrapped in a blanket, or, what it is. But I do feel like there is a different level of intimacy. Yes, I'm not able to give my client a hug if they want, but I do feel that I just feel like for the most part, most of my clients, I do feel like we are reaching a different level in therapy by doing it telehealth. And there's more consistency, that for sure. I notice I have less cancellations. I do still have people cancel, but I feel like there's less cancellation. Like there's less reason, like I just mentioned, with not having to worry about work or taking time off or traffic or car broken down, or even if they're sick, unless they're lost their voice or something, they still most of the time still come.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. So definitely some very valid points for telehealth to stay, and with its efficacy and actually improved connection, you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do notice, I do still get new clients who are like, who want to have somebody who's in person. And so I will, refer them out to somebody else if they're looking for somebody in person. But that's usually my first 5-second spiel when I'm talking to a new person, make sure they know that I'm 100% online.
Right. And yeah, I agree. I think it's a very valid form. I myself, as a practitioner, I find telehealth much more connecting. I feel personally more at ease in my own environment, and I feel like I can just focus on therapy. Whereas when I was in office, I am a person who gets very distracted by small talk, by the noises in the office, focus, things that it just is hard for me to feel comfortable and then be able to focus on a task in office. So with telehealth, it is absolutely just, for me as a provider, I found that to be so much better in terms of being able to deliver services. But also for clients, yeah, like you said, to me, it seems like nothing but benefits. The only thing that can be difficult is maybe sometimes I will share like a book or, something that I have in my office. I like to do that, or like kind of little,
I do too.
little things that you just have that are like therapeutic tools and stuff like that. Like, oh, hey, why don't you try this kind of thing? And, you can bring it back to me, or maybe you just kind of gift it over, kind of thing, or like a notebook. Some people don't even have like a notebook for like a journal. Be like, oh, I have an extra one. I miss that.
I do too. That was always something I liked to do. I always had in one of my cabinets, I'd go to like Ross or wherever and just buy like all the journals. Not all, I'd always have like a bunch of journals.
Love those.
And so I'd always give like a new client a journal and a pen.
Yeah. That's nice.
And I used to have like a little tiny fridge with snacks and drinks. And so
that's cool.
I do miss that, because I like that connection, but I do not miss having my next door neighbor, my next door office suite, with her nasty candle. And
I
don't miss that stuff. about sharing, having an office space, but I do miss like the connections. I miss like seeing my client's whole outfit and seeing like how they're doing and and just being able to give them a book. Yeah, because I always had a bookshelf full of books, and there were times when I'm like, you know what, let me just copy this page out, or let me just give them this whole book and know that I'm not going to get it back, because that's okay.
Yeah, I really love that. And there's something different about like sending it through the mail. It feels weird and invasive to me rather than handing it. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of not the same. So, you know, digital templates or whatever, I guess, have to just kind of do, which I don't love.
I have mailed a couple, like with permission. I'm like, is it okay? Is that I really want to give this book to you? So I have done that to one or two clients, and that's rare now, but I will just say like, hey, why don't you look up this book, or here's these worksheets. If I hardly ever do worksheets, but sometimes it is helpful. But I have mailed a client a book. I had an extra copy, and it was something that I thought they might like.
That's nice. That's really nice. I think they probably really appreciated that. You know, that's a nice thing to do. I personally just don't want to get into the practice of it, just because it just feels like it would just kind of never end. I have mailed, I think, maybe one or two things at this person's request, and they had financial hardships, you know, so I had no problem doing that, but it's just different than in person. I don't know.
It is. It just feels, it feels different. When you're in person, you're like, oh yeah, let me just grab this book from behind my, my bookshelf, and oh yeah, I read this a year ago or so. You'll like it. You know, return it if you can. If not, don't worry. You know, because most of the time I'm like, I'll never see that book again. But I used to be upset when I first became a therapist, but then I realized, like, all right, if I'm going to give it to them, just realize you're not going to
assume it's going to, it's just theirs. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. And I think we're fine with that, you know, like, right. Like it's, you know, at first it's kind of hard because it's tough, you know, you pay some good money for those and you really get attached to some of those books, you know, but it's, well, you know, I've got what I need from it. Let's give it to someone else. Kind of thing. But yeah, I think that those are some really good points, you know, that and like you said, they can be in the comfort of their own home. They could be in their pajamas. I've had people like just kind of waking up that they're like, I'm getting this in before I go to work kind of thing. Yeah. And that's really great, because it's like, okay, they may not have even shown up, like, because they maybe just woke up and they wouldn't have made it in time if it were in person, but they're getting it in, and you're, you know, it's a good session. You feel a good connection. And I don't know. I love telehealth. To me, it's not, I don't feel like I need that in person, because personally to me, I feel more comfortable in my own space. And I think the people I'm seeing obviously do too, you know, for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, I do notice, like, I do shift a lot now too, because I'm always like, maybe I need not to have a chair that rocks. But I do notice, like, when I am in person more, I think I shift even more, because I'm like, oh, should I have my legs completely down on the ground? Should I cross my leg? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I pull my shirt down? Is it like, so these are very things, like, should I have my hands just on the armrest? Should I have one arm? Should I lean more? Like, these are things that I think in microseconds throughout the session, or you know, like, or different sessions where I notice I don't do that, where I might shift a little bit, because it does get uncomfortable sometimes just sitting for an hour, but I notice I'm probably like less focused on myself, because, you know, we're human, and it's I don't want to say it's a show, but it is. Therapy is like it's like a sales thing. It's like you're there to help them, but you want to be presentable, and you want to look a certain way for the client.
Yeah, to provide services, there has to be a look and a feel to it. And to me, I feel like I can better control this square as opposed to an entire office. It's too overwhelming for me. It just is. It always has been. And so for me, it was a godsend for me personally, and for, I think, a lot of clients.
It's like just this little square of your life.
Yeah, like that's all I have to. And like, I'm okay with the fact that, you know, we were talking about my background is crooked. Like, okay, that's an easy fix. You know, I don't get so overwhelmed with that, although it is starting to really bother me. But I mean, like, you know, it's not like I can just, you know, I don't even have to worry about if I'm wearing pajama pants, which I am. And, you know, it's very simple. You know, I don't really have to worry about what I do with my hands, because I do a lot of gesturing and stuff like that. I can kind of keep that out of the square, you know, kind of thing.
Or you can put it in the square if you want.
Yeah, like if it's, you know, it's, to me, it feels more in my control. It's not, I get overwhelmed with all the details.
That's interesting you mentioned the hands, because I remember when we were in school, we had one professor who was such a pain in the ass. who I am
shall not be named.
I'm Irish and Italian, mostly Irish, but like my mom was a big hand talker. So I talk with my hands a lot.
Right.
And so I remember this one professor when we had to like practice therapy and we were being recorded and all this. I kept getting reprimanded. Like I put your hands on your lap. Like you must, like it's so unprofessional if you talk with your hands, if you do this. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even talk. I can't, then I'm like, my
I don't agree with
anxiety.
that.
Yeah, my anxiety is now at 1,000 points, or whatever percentage. And I was like that for a while. I was like, okay, oh wait, I'm moving my hands. Like I remember when I first went out on my own and I was like, okay, I can't move my hands. That'll look weird. They'll just be focused on my hands. But then as I started to become in my own, as the years went on, I was like, let me just be myself. And, I do talk with my hands and I express myself. And I think, even with telehealth, I'm sure they're fine if they see like a little hand up in the air every once in a while, because that's how I talk.
I think it's very contextual. I think if you have a person who is maybe very reactive and they're maybe just like recovering from something and you're aware of that, like in person, you probably don't want to be like, doing that or whatever, right? Like, and even then, I'm still not sure. It depends on the person, like, kind of how they grew up, what their gestures are. But yeah, I lean towards that side too. Be yourself. That's the way you're going to be most effective. But I can understand someone saying like, oh, if somebody's very reactive or if they're, had like a very traumatic event happening, like I know with kids and with, play therapy, which is what I used to do, being very aware of like the objects in the room, the space, kind of the closeness, things like that is very much a part of, being aware in terms of, with that usage and like movement and things like that. But, I think with an adult, it's your best judgment. And I do not think it's a hard and fast rule to just be like, oh, you can't use your hands. Like, I actually think that's kind of weird.
I thought it was, well, and of course in school, you're not sure what, you just want to pass head. But
yeah,
it's not like my hand gestures that I do. It's not like I'm making fist hand gestures or I'm going at the person with my hand gestures. They're usually just contained in my, in my little space.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's cultural, it is like your Italian and Irish, heritage, if you've had that, that's kind of a part of you. That's a hard thing to change because that is a manner of expression. That's our first expression is play and movement, right? So that's kind of can become people's extension to their speech. I've talked about how I've had selective mutism. For me, gestures were, I was kind of used to always adding that as an adjunct because I didn't want to speak, it was very hard for me to speak. And so that was like, that's very important to me. And I'm not going to have that like professor tell me that I'm not going to use that, that's ridiculous. And it sounds like you said the same thing, like there's different contexts and you have to take people into account. And that includes the provider as well. It's not just about, it's about the dynamic. So, I think that's maybe an outdated way of, and I also think that it's very culturally flattened, can I say, to say that you can't have gestures. I think that's a very like narrow perspective.
Yeah, because there are a lot of cultures that use their hands or talk with their hands or even expressive with their face. And so it's very, it would be very difficult to be a therapist robot or just to be exactly what, just like when we were in school, it's like, you can't just follow one theorist or one theory exactly because it's so antiquated and things change and things evolve and you learn your own method and what you like and who you like and how you want to work with your clients. And just it's the same with like, sometimes client can tell how I'm feeling on my face. Sometimes I might want to cry when I'm hearing something really sad or I might laugh with them or I'm human.
Yeah, it's funny because I think the way that our school kind of, for the most part, represented that, I think there were some professors that could see the grayscale in between that, but some of these like kind of, you shouldn't emote because then you're projecting your own stuff onto people. But there's also like a bonding to that as well. I think that sometimes those black and white rules that maybe were at times presented to us, depending on the professor and the class, are, I don't know, to me, I was like, that never really felt right. And it kind of requires you to practice a lot in therapy to kind of to know and to understand that. I don't think there can be a hard and fast rule in those things. I mean, there are, of course, some things like, are very black and white, like,
Ethics.
you don't socialize with, clients, and you don't, like,
Yeah.
they're not your friends, like things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. But, the gestures and how you kind of formulate that rapport, I think, can be very different depending on the location, the person, the cultures, the type of therapy, the the age of the client. Like, a lot of things
Yeah.
are so
Because
dependent on
sometimes
that.
there are some clients that are, almost the same age. They like the same things as you. They, like,
Mhm.
so it's like, yeah, maybe we'll have like a little conversation after therapy ends. I do that sometimes after we're scheduling the next thing. We'll be like, oh, what movie did you watch? Oh, what did you do this? What did you do?
Yeah,
What
you
are you
want a
doing this
human
week?
element
Yeah.
to it. Yeah. Yeah, and I gotta say, when I first started out, I was very afraid and robotic, and I was, oh, I have to kind of stick to this. And I just remember thinking, this doesn't work. Like, I'm not forming this rapport. That is, like, that's what they say is the most essential part of
Yeah.
therapy, is having that, And so that really does have to be looked at.
Yeah.
So,
And it is true. I
yeah.
think all therapists probably feel like they wish they could contact the clients that they saw the first year or so when they were a therapist, a newbie, and be like, I am sorry. I'm not that person anymore. I'm
Yes,
back to
yes.
me, and I know what I'm doing.
I've evolved into Tanya therapist or
Yeah.
Erin therapist. Like, I've made that kind of, those join in a nice uniform way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally. So anyone listening, if you recognize me,
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Same.
It's
Sorry.
tough,
Sorry.
but yeah, they kind of throw us in there, and they don't.
Yeah. The first of all, and plus we're just getting our hours the first couple of years. So it's just, we're just newbies
Yeah,
and figuring it out. And
yeah. So, that is, I know we kind of went off on,
sorry.
kind
Yeah,
of the therapy in session, but that is mental health,
that
that
is.
is like trends and stuff like that. But, I did want to also discuss, before we kind of wrap up here, NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. It's one of the largest grassroots, started out as a organization. They do advocacy, education for mental health. They're a great site. It's just NAMI if you want to look them
Yeah.
up and, have that resource for,
They
like, events or for education, things like
they
that.
have awesome. I've had quite a few clients and clients' families go. They have like really awesome. I think they offer them throughout the year, like because they have different local chapters, they have state chapters, national, but where they'll do online classes, in-person classes for the family member that might have mental illness. So then you have friends, or like you have different people that you can talk to that might understand what you're going through, and they have it in different things. So maybe they might have a group for people who have depression, or people who have anxiety, or just other things, or they have different activities. And then for the family ones, which is really awesome too, like there's more of a psychoeducation and also a support group. So I mean,
Yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
it's a really great organization, and they do walks throughout the year. They do different fundraising, but their website is really,
In depth.
yeah, it's a really great. I mean, I am a really big fan of
Resource.
them. It is free, and it's free for
Yeah,
people.
yeah. That's the really important thing. And it was started actually by, groups of families who had people in their family with mental illness. Like, that was kind of what they wanted to get help with, because they noticed a gap there.
Mm-hmm.
And it has come so far. It's a grassroots, like, it has beginnings as grassroots, just like families coming together and making all of this. And it is huge. It's
Yeah.
national now. Like, I don't know, that's just so,
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it's just,
amazing to
yeah,
me.
and again, being Mental Health Awareness Month, it's just, that is something too. Maybe see, whether you might know somebody who has a mental health issue or an illness, or you're curious, or you want to volunteer.
Yeah, yeah. Or, if it's affecting you, and, you understand, trying to understand that this person is also struggling, but it also, there's struggles with your interactions with this person, family member, whoever it is. Myself, I've done a walk with friends. I think it was the suicide prevention walk. And I've also gotten resources, with dealing with family members, that I found really helpful, really
Yeah.
insightful.
Yeah, I'm on their newsletter, and I'm always like, I want to volunteer. I just haven't found time to do it, but I have given their information out a lot to different clients, just for them to do their own research, or to give it to a family member. And that's a really good point to bring up though, Tanya. Like just that it's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to check it out, if you plug it into Google, NAMI, or National
I think it's
Alliance
is it
Mental
.org? I
Illness.
think it's a .org.
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah, it is. It's NAMI.org. And there's an about who we are kind of section, which explains where they came from. It's really amazing. I mean, if you're interested in that, you know. But yeah, there's events you can, you know, like Erin was saying, local chapters, things that you can do if you're interested, or if you need help because, you know, know someone who is struggling with mental illness. If you yourself are and need resources and need help, it's all there. It's really great.
And a lot of it's computerized, but they're also really good. Like if you go there, if there's a local chapter you can go, they'll have like actual handouts. I can't say enough good things about them.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something that definitely we want to highlight. And they'll probably be they do a lot of events, especially around May, but they do them year round.
Right.
So, you know, keep an eye out or go check that out if you want information, you want to volunteer, whatever, all of the above. It's really great. So, yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about? I know we could go on and on. This is like, you know, so much, but I guess we have to have a cutting point.
Yeah. I guess maybe even like if people have, you know, we always say this, if there's anything else that we miss. So if there's any mental health trends that you're like, yeah, you talked a little bit about ADHD and you talked a little bit about borderline, but I'm really seeing this, or I'm really curious about this. I haven't seen you two talk about this or that. Let us know, because we try to stay up and we do hear what our clients are talking about, but there might be something else that you're like, wow, you know, like I've really noticed in, you know, this phobia, or, you know, this new anxiety is coming up, or people are talking about this or that. Let us know, because, you know, we're always looking for different show topics, and, you know, our goal is, you know, to be entertaining, but also to be helpful.
Yeah. Kind of bring up a little bit of, you know, infusing a little bit of our expertise, but also who we are in it. You know, we talk casually. We're not getting so in depth, but we would, you know, just like to bring it up for awareness, but with accurate awareness. I think is kind of our goal.
Yeah. And like how Tanya mentioned earlier, like you want it more than 50 seconds, you know, like it's, you know, that's, you know, like that's, I say 50 seconds because that's about the length of a reel. So it's like, really, you can't do too much. You know, like you can't really get too much information in that span of time.
Yeah, don't let that be your entire knowledge base. You know, if it's something that sparks an awareness, fine. But, you know, just realize there's so many other components, research, expertise, specialty, things that you want to invest in outside of that. Well. It's a very serious thing. It's not just we meet you and we instantly know what you are. You know, it involves a lot more than that. Right. But yeah, so we hope you enjoyed this. Like Erin said, if you have any suggestions, even outside of, you know, mental health or anything that you see you want us to cover, please feel free to send us recommendations, messages.
Yeah, any shows, you know, we love shows and movies. So if there's any show too that you're like, oh, wait a minute, you know, blah, 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 you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wicked Psychotherapists, or on Facebook. We are the Wicked Psychotherapists. Subscribe and follow everywhere you can find podcasts. We're on all. Leave us a review. Give us 5 stars if you can. Give us 5 stars. We put in effort. So
if you can't, just don't even bother.
Just give us 5 stars. Yeah, leave us a review. It really helps us out. It does. So get more listeners and everything. And don't forget, stay wicked
and keep your mind well.
Yes. See you next week.
Yeah,
guys.
Have a great day. Bye.
Guys.
Bye.